Okay, maybe I won't go to do karaoke, but I'm on it. I'm on it. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the beautiful song, beautiful voice, beautiful way you carry. You have one guitar in your hand, and it sounds like you have 20. But so I'm excited to share with you the thoughts of this topic, because the idea today that we're sharing with one another is undefended love. And what I found from some of the sharing at the first service was, why is this so important? Because we try to define love, don't we? And it's almost what I'm speaking of as the undefined love, an undefined and an undefended love. It's that agape love. And to launch us into the awakening of this idea, I've had Damien set up a little video clip for you. It takes about 5 minutes or so, but it's you might have seen it on YouTube. I saw it on Facebook, and this is talking about the encounter. So the encounter is another way to look at this field that we are going to share and dwell in today together. So the lights, Chris, and thank you, and I'm going to step away, and thank you.
One of David Fleming's most intriguing ideas was encounter.
Encounter is the act of recognizing something, a planet, a woodland, a person. It's the acknowledgement that there is something there which has the gift of life, self, soul, and the ability to surprise. When the animal ecologist Stefan Harding observed the little muntjac deer in Rushbed's Wood, there was the encounter.
I was very honored to be quoted by him in Lean Logic. So yes, I think we were, we felt a very strong affinity for each other. Well, encountering means really meeting something in a way that goes beyond one's intellectual process. So normally in the West, particularly as a scientist, as I am, one's taught to encounter, say, a tree through one's ideas. So how did the shape of that tree come about through the process of natural selection? What might the forces have been that made, say, the sycamore leaf the shape it is? And, it becomes a sort of instinct when you're a scientist and an ecologist to look at nature in that sort of way. That's not encounter. Encounter is when that conceptual structure vanishes and you actually meet the being as the being, coming forth from itself as itself, revealing itself to you in a way that's beyond your intellect, in a way that's much more deeply intuitive and much harder to express. In fact, scientific language is inappropriate for this kind of encounter. It's poetry that does it. It's a poetic encounter. Well, I had many experiences of this kind of encounter with the muntjac deer that I studied for my doctorate. And some of the moments I most remember would be when I was just waiting, and for many minutes or even an hour or more, nothing would happen. And then, if I was lucky, a muntjac would appear and just stand, even just for a few seconds. And if I was lucky, it would look in my direction. Then time stood still. Time stopped. And there was this infinite moment of meeting between myself and the muntjac. There was a sense of the being of the muntjac as a revelation, as if some kind of syrupy smoke was moving from the muntjac to me infusing my whole being with muntjackness. So I could immediately understand the wholeness of the muntjac and how they relate to the entire wood. I could have an intuitive perception of that in that instant, but who the muntjac were as an animal with their own ecological niche in the forest. And it went further than that. I could also get a sense of the ecology of the whole forest. It suddenly came into focus through the being of the muntjac. The whole came into my perception. And then if I was very lucky, then that wholeness would spread out and I'd get a sense of the ecology of the entire earth. That didn't happen very often, but that was possible. It was possible for it to expand. So in other words, I sank into myself. I sank into my wider body, which is, as my friend David Abraham would say, is the earth herself. I became aware of my wider body, all through the presence of the muntjac, because for me the muntjac became a kind of totemic animal. I'd spent so much energy and effort, intellectual effort, physical effort, emotional effort in studying them, that all those energies became concentrated in the muntjac, which for me symbolized all these different aspects of the ecology of the wood and indeed of the earth herself.
When Stephen Harding observed that little muntjac deer in Rushbed's Wood, there was encounter. When what you've been studying looks back at you, it's not understanding that hangs in the air, but hello, there's conversation. You're not alone, and that can start you thinking.
So, did you learn something? Encounter. That's the field. That's the undefined field. The field in which the scientist refers to as his larger body, his largeness. And it's a field of grace. And it's that field that we stumble around when we fall in love with another human being. We start to close that field down and think that that's what it is. But no, it's so much more. It is so omnipresent, omniscient. This field is what all, like he said, poets can speak to, scientists struggle, ministers struggle. We as people, as human beings, trying to articulate that love that we feel, that connection to our heart field, and that field of another, we are clumsy in our ways, but it's what love is. And when we can arrive in that space, absolutely undefended and open and pure, as we receive another into that field, there is healing, there is connection, there is wholesomeness. Stephen and Andrea Levine describe this field: nothing bonds like the truth. Nothing dispels distrust like the revealed heart. Let me say that again, because this field dispels things, because you can't take anything that feels tainted with your doubt or your worries or your concerns and still feel yourself in that field, because it contracts you. And so it's saying this: nothing can dispel distrust like the revealed heart. Bonding is this willingness to reveal, to simply be in the heart of another, to reveal yourself so wholeheartedly that you cross that boundary, you cross that barrier, and you are in the heart of another. We enter in these relationships all the time, and not always are we conscious of our journey, but we're always making authentic connections with others. And it's asking us all the time, and especially in this teaching, and especially in our fellowship with one another, it is asking us to look deeply into ourselves, to create a greater intention out into our world, to find the courage to explore the way we live, why we live, and how we react to the world around us. How did we react to the horrific Las Vegas incident this week? At asking yourself, what do I do with that? What do I do with that? We pray deeper. We look into the field of possibilities, and we watched how the incident was a flash a horrific, horrible, nightmarish moment. But what followed were story after story after story of love revealed, of courage, of people holding others and taking their own life to save their 4 sons, to take their life so that their wife can survive. That love was so huge, that courage, and the moments of being able to be alive long enough to whisper, I love you. I will always love you in those moments. Wow. Let us take the time always to digest the love that prevails after all that we witness in our world. As hard as it is to look at, let us revel in those moments that love speaks volumes louder than the horrific act. So we're entering it all the time, and the invitation is to learn to love yourself and not have the need to defend yourself. You're going to cultivate, when you can do that, such a greater sense of kindness to yourself, to love this self. This self. What is that we keep pointing to? That is the connection to the seed self, the God self. Mark Nepo described it, and just as the scientist was talking about the maple leaves and looking at that connection when we look so deeply into nature itself. Mark Nepo says, is there anything worth knowing? Is there anything worth knowing that the heart doesn't already know? If a seed contains the entire tree, doesn't the heart contain every gift? That I sat with over and over again. If a seed contains the tree, doesn't the heart then contain every gift? Doesn't the ounce of spirit we are given contain the river of what is? Isn't this what we feel streaming by when we close our eyes and hush our mind? Hasn't the work always been to water the heart so it might sprout what it knows, just as the tree grows? That just moves me. Anybody with me on that one? Okay, because it was like, wow, I've heard that within every seed is the potentiality of the oak, and your own seed is growing who you are. Yeah. But when I read it this way, this ounce of spirit that we were given contains all that there is, and we have the privilege to rise to that in undefended presence within us. It always is in its pure quality. And Tara Brach is speaking to the same concept, says, recognize this undefended presence, recognize it, know it, live it, breathe it, and act in it as if it was your last time. Wow. Act in that field as if it's your last time. When you allow yourself to lift your heart and be that aware, that awake in everything that you do, undefended love pours from you, and you connect with another in such a way that that field, just as the man staring in the deer, you become one into that field. This is a field that are often distracted from because of our mind, because of the ways that we have allowed many different little ways to block this knowing inside of us, right? We contract at moments when we're wounded. We contract when we've got our feelings hurt or something isn't going our way. We feel right, they feel wrong. We contract, the field is walled off. So it happens. We live in humanity. We are human beings. We live with those chemistries running our system, but we've also, in our humanity, have been gifted by God with the higher consciousness to always look into that field of the body and say, be gentle, dear one. Be gentle, dear one. There is a higher way to deal with this. And so we have this noise that sometimes we need to have skillful practices to filter out And the Tao is the field that I'm speaking of, again, is the other reference for that is the Tao, that field of absolute love. And William Martin wrote this wonderful book called The Tao of Forgiveness, and I shared this little story about the birds. This is how we can allow the conditioned voices inside of us that always perpetuate. It's like a recording. This is how we can turn to that through the practice of the Tao, through the practice of the way, to let those voices fade. So here's a gentleman, Stanley, put your name there, was cursed by a large flock of raucous, chattering birds. What I found so amusing about this story is when I first learned to meditate, I was taking self-realization lessons, and I was in my apartment. I was 19 years old, and I sat down. I had everything right. I had the lesson before me. I had the breath practice. I had it down pat, and the dang birds would just not shut up. And I'm thinking, I can't meditate here, these birds. And then I'd get up, and then I'd think, oh, it seems like they've gone away. So I'd go back, and then the birds would come back. So this story about the birds was like, say what? So Sue was cursed by a large flock of raucous, chattering birds. And for some reason, this flock of birds had attached themselves to Stanley and followed him wherever he traveled. At night, they sat on the eaves of his house and squawked and twittered from dusk till dawn. When he walked out of the house in the morning, they flew a short distance into the air and remained circling above his head throughout the day. He tried throwing rocks, yelling, waving his arms wildly, but nothing worked. The birds remained as if they were attached by a string to his head. Stanley went to the Taoist sage who lived in the neighboring village. I am cursed by birds, he wailed above the cheeping and tweeting. Please help me get rid of them. The sage looked calmly at the birds. Everyone has birds. You can't get rid of them. Can't get rid of them, cried Stanley. Oh my God, I'm going crazy. I can't live with all this noise. Walk with me, said the sage, and they walked for several hours up a small mountain range and down the other side to the ocean. They made their way down a steep path cut into the cliff until they reached an expanse of sandy beach. Together they walked out to the ocean's edge and stood looking across the vast water to the horizon. Now what, said Stanley, whose birds continued to circle close over his head. Now nothing, said the sage, just listen to the ocean. So Stanley tried. At first, all he was aware of was the familiar chattering of high-pitched bird squawks. But for a moment, he did notice the background rhythmic, gentle washing of the endless waves across the shore. As he turned his attention to the sound, the birds about his head began to circle a few feet higher. When he turned his attention back, the circle of birds tightened back down. He turned his attention to the ocean, and once again, the birds expanded their range, circling even farther and farther away this time. He turned to the sage. Interesting, Stanley said. The sage nodded. The ocean is your Tao mind. It's always there, always offering an infinite amount of room for your life. Do you understand? I don't know, said Stanley, but I want to be here by the ocean more often, that's for sure. The sage smiled. It's always here. By the way, said Stanley, you said everyone has birds. Where are yours? Oh, said the sage, with a dismissive wave of his hand, they're still here, but their circle is miles away. I hardly notice them anymore unless I really concentrate on them. And I can't imagine why I would want to do that, can you? So our birds are those distractions of heart and mind. And the opportunity for us is to do spiritual practice again. And what I point to today is the offering of prayer into that field. Just as the sage was instructing Stanley, there is a place in silence where the birds quiet down. There is this field. And that's where we allow our meditative practices to take us to. We allow ourselves to sit in the presence of that, to sit very still, and even be with the birds until they begin to get further and further away. Mark Nepo also says, kindness and suffering are wordless teachers, ready to bend and soften us until we accept that we are here. that try as we will, we can't build our way out of an existence or dream our way out of being human. Once opened in this way, we come to know in a felt way that we already are in the one true world, and the only thing to do is to love being here. To love being here. So we drop the fight. We drop that part of ourselves that is in resistance to what is. Does that mean you condone everything and you become a pacifist? No, you become even more courageous and you become more willing to speak your heart. And when you speak your heart, you're speaking it with truth. You're speaking it with a strength of being undefended, and yet knowing that the source of your truth comes from the depth of you that you have worked on and polished and allowed only loving kindness to be flowing through you as you. Tara Brach reminded that this idea that you need to shed some of the ways that we have created our personality and our ego. Some of that we need to shed in order to really shine as the true spiritual being that we are. And she said, don't you know that the snake who cannot shed its skin perishes? The snake that cannot shed its skin perishes. The human that cannot shed those unskillful ways, you will perish in that. And so we as spiritual beings, we are asking for ourselves to really unmask those negative self-images. We can feel the fear and the hurt, but we can go further than that. We can experience the self-loathing rising from shame and the assumed ugliness that is associated with our initial ability to absorb any new information. That's all going to come up, but look at it as a gift of awakening. Because when you contract around that, you've shut it down. But when you try to protect yourself, run away, defend, attack it, go to sleep, drug it, eat it, whatever you try to do, it starts to frame walls around you. But if you stay with the investigation and with a non-reactive heart, something special happens. Something begins to take hold and ground in you as you observe a deeper truth, staying with something exactly as it is. And Byron Katie is the person that comes to my mind in her skillful way. We've done classes on this. She writes, I need your love. Is that true? Is that true? And show her words of wisdom and speaking to this field. She says, defense, think about this, defense is the first act of war. If you tell me that I mean rejecting, hard, unkind, unfair, I say, thank you. I say, thank you, sweetheart. I can find all these in my life. I have been everything you say and more. Tell me everything you see, and together we can help me understand. Through you, I come to know myself. Without you, how can I know the places in me that are so unkind and invisible? You bring me to myself. So, sweetheart, look into my eyes and tell me again. Now, doesn't that take courage? I've been here since I took on this ministry, and it doesn't feel very good. Sometimes my heart shrinks when people come to tell me that something I've done doesn't agree with them. But I take a big breath and I try to really listen. I try to listen to their hearts without defending mine. And then I might whimper to Charlie, has to hear it all, or Sylvia. But, sometimes because of the tender heart, I still think I can polish this. I can do this. It is my calling. It is my calling. It is every one of our callings to rise, to be the one to say, tell me again. Look me in the eye and tell me again. I want you to give me everything. This is how friends meet. It's called integrity. I am all things. If you see me as unkind, that is an opportunity for me to go inside and look at what appears in my life. Have I been unkind? I can find it. Have I acted unfairly? That doesn't take me long to acknowledge. If I'm a bit cloudy about it, my kids can fill me in. What could anyone tell me that I couldn't find at some time in my own life? If you say one single thing that I have the urge to defend, that thing is the very pearl waiting inside of me to be discovered. Wow. That puts a whole new taste to people are only mirroring back to you what you need to know. I hate that saying. But the truth of it, when I can look at it more like, this is the pearl you're giving me, I will receive it in my heart. And you might be a little shaky at first, but the divine inside of you allows you and empowers you to be stronger. And remember, Byron Katie's questions that you ask, and I've been seeing it in so many writings now, is this true? Is what somebody's telling me, is it true? And you can say, no, I didn't do that. Is it absolutely true? Is it absolutely true? Well, I did at one time, just like Byron Katie said, you go back and you soul search. And then you ask the question, is it mine? And what would I be without this thought now penetrating my heart? What would I be without that? What can I do with that? Can I turn this around in such a way that it becomes my pearl and not the knife that's stabbing my heart? Can I turn it around? Yes, you can. How do you do that? You find a practitioner. You find a minister. You find a friend. You find God. You find prayer. You find the way into silence of your being, and you ask the questions, and you ask, and then you sit in the stillness. And as the birds get further away, there is a stillness, there is a silence, there is that encounter, a field that you enter, and the answers come. And they come in such a gentle way from the beloved, from the divine. They touch your heart, and you are awakened, and you are alive. She says, love would not deny a breath. It wouldn't deny a grain of sand or a speck of dust. It is totally in love with itself, and it delights in acknowledging itself through its own presence in every way without limit. Love embraces all, everything from the murderer to the rapist to the saint to the dog to the cat. Love is so vast within itself that it will burn you up. It is so vast that there's nothing you can do with it. All you can do is be it. All you can do is be it. I know that for us. I know that for us, and I know that when we have those moments of contraction, when we're really shut down and in a place where we feel threatened, where we don't trust anymore, that's the place where the heart is longing to be opened. There's an instinct to shut down, like I said, it's the natural way of the body. But listen deeply there. Listen deeply, beyond the birds, beyond the voices. What do you need? What do you need in that moment to get clear? The silence, the stillness. You need God. You need that connection to the divine. It will wrap you, hold you. If you just vanish and you let things go, you set up another obstacle in your heart. Sit with yourself. Practice being undefended. Practice the undefended love and have that encounter. Be so gentle as you enter that field with this greater love. And then in the Stephen Levine, they also say, and yet fear, pain, and even self-loathing is precisely what we need to approach if we want to be less defended. The distance from your pain, your grief, and your unattended wounds is the distance from your partners in the world. Our discomfort is a great indicator pointing out the places where we are disconnecting from ourselves and from each other. So the invitation here in this dialogue that we're having, you with yourself right now in your mind and your heart, what words are you absorbing? What do you hear? Is compassion, is to find that place of empathy and compassion within you. Keep your heart open to pain, to fear, and begin to tolerate those uncomfortable feelings. You will heal. You will heal. You will bring it to the light. You will bring it to love. And when you access this authentic place within you, you're diving into the emotional defenses that you've just been used to creating. And then you get to work gently into that field with such compassion and empathy, knowing and remembering that you're continuing to grow and to learn from what does not define you anymore. The place where the qualities of love, joy, peace, beauty, life, light, wisdom, That's the true nature. That's the divine within you. That's beckoning you inward. Peel back all your defenses. Become transparent to allow this love to flow unimpeded, unconditionally through you as you. How, again, do you do that? Self-inquiry. Express your essential self. Find your nature at its core. Ask yourself to soul search. This is a path of liberation. It's a path into love. And Damien, when he was doing the readings, Ernest Holmes spoke to that when he said, this encounter, this idea that there is nothing that keeps us from that field. We do not dare to throw ourselves with abandonment into a seeming void, but if we did, we would find our feet planted firmly on a rock, for there is a place in the mentality, in the heights of its greater realization, where it throws itself with complete abandonment into the very center of the universe. That is the encounter. There is a point, the supreme moment of realization, where the individual merges with this love, not to the loss of who he is, where a sense of oneness or all of life enters his being, and there is no sense of the other. Isn't that where you want to be? You want to be there, not struggling, not fighting, not hating, not angry, not all about you, but all about all that is, all that's going on. So I'll invite Judy up right now because, you know, the Dalai Lama speaks of it in his words of the open heart, and I'll just briefly touch that. It is that field where you find a sense of balance and equanimity. And so I take you from that field and back into the mind of the Tao, and I ask you these questions. I ask you these questions as we go into our prayer together. Where does your attention normally rest? Where are you allowing yourself to settle? Do you settle it on the news? Or do you go to the story behind that, to where the heart and love is trying to give you the pearls? Are you always turning your conscious mind to the issues, beliefs, and stories that keep you from forgiveness? How do the countless distractions of our society give the illusion of rest while still keeping our attention away from the ocean of the Tao, the mind, keeping us unconscious of the forgiveness just waiting for us to arrive? So we enter that field. And as Judy plays the piano keys so beautifully, we feel all of the birds rising further and further until what remains in this room, this place above us, is this vast field of stillness, of silence, of light, of glory, of grace, of truth, of love. That field where we become larger as we allow our hearts to merge with that. You see, God is all this. I am one with that. The keys continue to play, and our journey goes deeper. And we enter that Tao mind. The birds are familiar and noisy. They clamor for attention, distract and divert me from my life. They accuse me of transgressions and point out the evil that others do. I've created them and I've accepted them, but I choose now not to feed them. May their noise become faint in the distance, and the soothing surf of the Tao be my company of my mind. And as we dwell in that, we feel all of us that we have been uplifted, that we have allowed ourselves to raise our consciousness into that undefended field of love, where only grace and pearls are fed to you. And in that knowing, we are grateful. We have the courage today. We have the courage to walk our talk and to speak our truth, but also a knowing when to be quiet and when to deeply, deeply listen and not speak our word. Just listen to understand another, and to find truth together from there. We are undefended. We are unconditional. That is the field that the Christ is inviting you into that space, into that knowing. The piano keys continue, and the Tao mind continues to expand and to hold all of us. Can you feel it? Can you breathe with that? Can you leave here this day knowing I have been touched? I have had an awakening. I move through this day grateful for the partnership, the fellowship of this center, for the truth that infuses through each one of us now, through the keys. The piano continues to play. We are awake. We are ready. Thank you, God. We've arrived, and so it is. Thank you.